So, thank you so much for the kind introduction long ago. Thank you to the League of Women Voters and to the Steuben County Library here, Corning Library as I know it as a former native, for bringing us together for this powerful evening. I'd like to thank the folks who shared their reflections. That's where I first messed up on my remarks on what I was going to do tonight, but I am going to stick to it. I'd like to thank Marianne and Ario for your important work. I'm humbled by it. I wish I could join you in all the good work that you're doing, but we all have to stick with what we can do.
That's right.
So when I worked in the military, I helped to plan events, write speeches, so I do know what it took for Diane and Linda and I forget your lovely name, Connie's work, so I appreciate that as well. So in September, I'm going to stick to what Diane asked me to do. What was I doing and what am I doing now? And why do I care about it all? On September 11th, 2001, I was a civilian. Retired from the U.S. Air Force, I had moved from Washington, D.C. to Ithaca, and with the help of the GI Bill, I had finished my degree in human development from Cornell University. Hence, like so many other Americans, some of you who experienced it differently, I watched the Twin Towers burn and fall on my television and the private space of my living room. In the surreal aftermath, this is the image that consoled me. Maybe you've seen it as well. They're still showing it once a year on this day. As part of an art installation set up a few months later, after the towers went down, on an empty lot next to Ground Zero, 2 vertical beams of blue light recreate the space where the World Trade Center towers once stood and where 2,763 souls died. To me, the blue towers of light were not just a tribute to the dead, but represented illumination, hope, healing, forbearance, faithfulness to our ideals, and the possibility of enlightened thinking, and a new, more noble stage of human development. Of course, what actually happened as a direct reaction to the terrorist attacks of 9/11 was the exact opposite of enlightenment. The early signs of the climate crisis were already at hand in 2001. We could have seized that moment in time as an opportunity to divest from fossil fuels, pursue a World War II style mobilization toward renewable energy, and deny our enemies income and a source of foreign exchange. Instead, the United States went and waged war on false pretenses against a nation not even responsible for the attacks, and in ways that served to secure our access to supplies of oil and its infrastructure. Along the way, we demonized an entire religion, clamped down on civil liberties, and turned our own Muslim American brothers and sisters into a persecuted other. As a lesbian soldier who faithfully served my country both before and after Don't Ask, Don't Tell, I knew something about demonization, fear of discovery, and deportation. So for me, these blue columns of light over Manhattan led me, 15 years later, to another column of lights, this one illuminating a blizzard in North Dakota. In the foreground are teepees constructed in a floodplain along the Missouri River in North Dakota. It's a place called Standing Rock. Inside the teepees are indigenous people, and this valley where they are camped is the historical site of the longest running Indian wars in U.S. history, where decade after decade, Native Americans were slaughtered by U.S. Armed Forces. This stream of light heading toward the teepees represents the headlights of vehicles, each one filled with veterans of the armed forces. And this is a deployment. But this time, the troops behind the headlights have come at the invitation of the folks in the teepees, and they brought no weapons. Instead, they brought a willingness to stand unarmed with the Standing Rock Sioux and their gathered allies against a common enemy, Energy Transfer Partners Dakota Access Pipeline, which was built to carry crude oil under Lake Oahe. This pipeline not only threatens a key source of drinking water, but also locks in 30 coal-burning power plants worth of greenhouse gases. When the permit for this project was issued last July, Native Americans from 300 different tribes converged to stop it by putting their bodies on the line in acts of nonviolent civil disobedience. To the Standing Rock Nation, this body of water is a living relative. On November 15th, Veterans Stand for Standing Rock put out a call to veterans to come to Standing Rock to join the Water Protectors. And we came, didn't we, Darrell?
Yes, we did.
By December 5th, 4,000 of us from across the nation answered that call. What united us was the oath that we each had taken as soldiers to defend our nation against all enemies, foreign and domestic. I myself served in the U.S. Army and then in the U.S. Air Force, from which I retired as a senior master sergeant. While on active duty, I had the privilege to travel to over 20 countries and another 5, including Syria, while working on food security issues at Cornell. Many of these nations were where drinking water was scarce and made children sick. So I saw firsthand how environmental calamity breeds conflict and threatens security. In recent years, an unrelenting drought in Syria has driven hundreds of thousands of rural people off their farms and into the cities, including Aleppo, where the displaced and the desperate have become recruitment targets for terrorist groups like ISIS. Scientists publishing in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences have made clear that climate change is fueling Syria's drought and in turn Syria's civil war. U.S. military veterans are on the front lines of climate justice fights throughout the United States, including right here in upstate New York. This, as you may recognize, is Seneca Lake, the site of a long-standing fight to keep fracked gas from being stored in abandoned underground salt caverns along its shorelines. Between 2014 and 2016, an ongoing civil disobedience campaign at Seneca Lake resulted in more than 600 arrests and generated worldwide press and attention. Our central activity was blockading trucks at the gate in the form of, again, nonviolent civil disobedience. And I'm honored to be here. I'm looking out over the audience, and there's a number of us who are part of those 600 people. What you might not know, or what you maybe do know, is we won this fight at Seneca Lake.
Amen.
One of my roles in this movement was to organize logistics and work on communications, which was also my role in the Air Force and at the White House. So I brought those skills with me to the front line. And as it so happened, I also took those skills to the Chemung County Jail, where I was incarcerated for 8 days for my role in blockading the fossil fuel industry. So here's pictured one of the many blockade lines. This one consists entirely of veterans from all branches of the military. Isn't that right, Darrell? What united us on this line was a sense of duty and the belief that storing volatile, highly pressurized fossil fuels below Seneca Lake is a threat to safety and security. I am the 4th vet on the left. I'm still facing an outstanding charge of disorderly conduct for my actions on that day. As a soldier who served my country, I am proud of my various medals of honor, including the one I received for good conduct. But I'm equally proud of my current charge of disorderly conduct. I received that for taking a stand against fossil fuel build-out right here at home. And my actions are a direct result of the heartbreak I felt after 9/11 and the promise I felt in those blue towers of light. While the message on climate change from the military is coming from veterans, it's also coming from active duty leadership. In fact, the military brass is actually way out front on this, and it has been for years. In July 2015, the the Department of Defense released a major report documenting how climate change is a security risk because, and I'm quoting now, it degrades living conditions, human security, and the ability of governments to meet the basic needs of their populations. That's why our military leaders sent Mr. Trump an open letter published in the Scientific American, which urged him to see climate change as a security threat, as do they. When our naval and air bases are battered by storm surges and rising seas, military readiness is indeed threatened. The words climate change may never be spoken by the governor of Florida, but I can guarantee you they are spoken by the leadership at Norfolk Naval Base, which is seen down here. Notably, during the confirmation process, Trump's own Secretary of Defense answered Senate Armed Services Committee questions that are at odds with Trump's views on climate change. The SecDef's bottom line, climate change is real, and it's a threat to American interests abroad and Pentagon assets everywhere. He stressed climate change is a real-time issue, not some distant what if. And here's our Intelligence Committee weighing in. And I'm just going to read this slide to you, and as I do, I'd ask that you reflect on the relationship between climate disruption and war. Effects of climate change on national security, threats to the stability of countries, heightened social and political tensions, adverse effects on food prices and availability, increased risks to human health, negative impacts on investments and economic competitiveness, potential climate discontinuities, and secondary surprises. And what those secondary surprises, I don't even want to know what they are. So I'm going to play you the National Intelligence Council's message may have fallen on deaf ears for now, but a recent documentary has laid this out in a way that is pretty hard to ignore, and I'd like to show you just a trailer of that clip if I can get this going.
We built society on this assumption of climate stability, and that stability is changing. All these things we take for granted, they're not just givens anymore.
The just released report from the Pentagon, climate change and the challenges it's creating for the military.
The latest report says global warming is driving weather to new levels of extremes.
If 99% of my intelligence told me there's an ambush waiting for me, I don't get to say, yeah, but there's that 1% that says there's no ambush, so the hell with the other 99%.
As a member of the United States military and 30-plus years of service in uniform, climate change is what we call an accelerant to instability.
If you have an area that is already unstable and then has the additional challenge of water shortages or food shortages or a disaster that makes people move, then you can start seeing conflict situations.
Syria's deadly conflict, a full-blown civil war.
If we look around the world today, we can already see conflict and climate in play right under the headlines that we're reading.
The new study finds climate change exacerbated the worst drought ever in modern Syria as a consequence of human interference.
Fragile social systems just need one more shock to tip them over the edge into social breakdown, into war.
Failure to think about how climate change might impact our globally interconnected system is a failure of imagination.
The flip side of the climate threat is the energy and resilience opportunity.
As a soldier, we're always looking to have an edge on the future. We can pay now, pay later.
So that resonated with me the first time I saw that. And it is a powerful enough message that we don't need to take a look any further than the news cycles from the last couple days in Hurricane Irma to understand why our military and our national security experts are sounding the alarm. There are 21 military bases in Florida. One is the United States Central Command, which is headquartered in Tampa, and hosts one of the largest military coalitions in U.S. history, a coalition of over 15 nations formed following the 9/11 attacks with one common purpose: to fight terrorism. U.S. CENTCOM personnel were evacuated during Irma, leaving only a skeleton crew behind. This is Central Command's area of responsibility, and I don't think it's a stretch to see that leaving this area in the hands of a bare-bones crew is a national security threat and dangerous. A number of other military bases in Florida were also forced to evacuate this week. In sum, climate change is first and foremost a human rights issue. And that's why I'm proud to serve the climate justice movement as an activist. But the climate crisis is also a national security crisis. What climate scientists call data, we in the military call intelligence. And good data is good intelligence. A stable climate creates the conditions for stable governments and stable geopolitics. Or to say it in another way, loading up our atmosphere with heat-trapping carbon creates the conditions for violence. Working for peace requires working for decarbonization and renewable energy. For me, that has been the lesson from 9/11. So what can you do? I highly recommend that Action Public Service and church groups host a screening of the age of consequences. Perhaps one might want to arrange a viewing of this with Congressman Tom Reed. It's an easy hosting situation if you just go to the website for the documentary. I'd like to elicit your support for H.R. 3671, the Off Fossil Fuels for a Better Future Act, also known as the OFF Act. This act, which was very recently introduced by U.S. Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard, will, and I'm quoting here, put the United States on a pathway to replace fossil fuels with 100% clean energy generation and use by 2035. Some are calling for 2050, she's calling for 2035, and that's just about the right number because tick, 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 we are running out of time. This legislation also eliminates tax giveaways to the fossil fuel industry and provides support to transitioning workers who will be impacted by this generational change. So it also provides all those jobs that seems to drive the narrative in this country. So here is Representative Gabbard. It's no coincidence that a congressional sponsor of the OFF Act is herself active duty military. That part of our government that sees the threat of climate change clearly and understands the urgency. Tulsi enlisted in the Army in 2003 and went on to serve 2 tours in the Middle East, including Iraq. She saw firsthand the risks to our servicemen and women from the necessity to transport and store vast amounts of explosive fossil fuels that painted a target on the backs of our troops. Like so many other veterans who enlisted after 9/11, Congresswoman Gabbard is now taking the lead in the fight for climate justice. It makes complete sense to me that a congresswoman who to this day continues to serve the nation as an Army soldier would be the sponsor of this crucial special legislation. And I, for one, am very grateful for her leadership. Tonight, I call on Congressman Tom Reed to endorse the OFF Act. And I call on all Corningites and other constituents in New York's 23rd District to push him to do so. Reed sits on the Bipartisan Climate Solutions Caucus. Yet thus far, he has a terrible record on fossil fuels and in his support of fracking and other fossil fuel infrastructure projects like pipelines and compressors that push fracked gas. He is failing to protect his constituents, and he is failing to protect the national security of the United States. It's really as simple as that. So, Tom Reed, it's never late to do the right thing. And it's up to all of us to show him the path to redemption. So in closing, I ask this of everyone here tonight: learn about the OFF Act, sign the petition, write Tom Reed, show him age of consequences. Show him what we're headed for. More of the same. More war, more storms, more fires. Enough is enough. This is where you can find the information on the act, the petition. It's through Food and Water Watch, another organization that's doing tremendous work on our behalf. So thank you very much for your time and putting up with